Fordham, author and historian and adjunct professor of history at Charleston Southern University and the Citadel. Now, throughout the early years of the 20th century, you had situations where lynchings took place and the sheriffs either took part themselves or did nothing to stop it. Well, this story is nothing like that. And it happened in my hometown of Spartanburg, South Carolina, back in the months of August and September 1913. You see, on August the 18th, 1913, there was a black man named Will Fair who was boarding a streetcar in Glendale, a suburb of Spartanburg, to go to work on Pine Street in the city of Spartanburg. And on the way, he passed this white lady who was about 19 years old, who was bent down tying her shoelaces. Well, he thought nothing of it, and he went on the train and took the train and got off on Pine Street and found himself being arrested. And he said, for what? Well, it turns out that the woman accused him of molesting her. He's like, what? What are y'all talking about? And they took him to the city jail. And while he was at the city jail, however, the Carolina Spartan newspaper out of Spartanburg wrote this very inflammatory headline that day. It says, Negro assaults white woman at Whitestone, promptly arrested. Yeah. And it goes on with other inflammatory subheadlines like, act arouses the entire country, etc. and so forth. And the result of this was predictable. A mob gathered at the jail to lynch Will Fair. And the mob got to over 1,000 strong. But Sheriff William J. White was in the jail with his deputy. And he said, no, not on my watch. The mob got through so belligerent that they took some dynamite and blasted off part of the jail. And Sheriff William J. White said, oh no, that's going too far. He wired Mayor O.L. Johnson of Spartanburg, and the mayor said that he had been advised by friends to keep his hands off in the matter. Really? The governor at that time was Coleman Livingston Blease. So he wired Coleman Blease in Columbia, and Coleman Blease was very much in favor of lynching and had his hands bloodied with a number of cases of this kind. And of course he refused to help. So William J. White strapped on his shooting irons and went out to the gate and told the mob of 1,000 strong, he said, so help me God, I will kill the first man that breaks through that gate. And he got in a shootout where 3 of the men were wounded, but Sheriff William J. White survived. And the 3 wounded eventually wound up in jail, and the mob of 1,000, seeing that the brave sheriff meant business, they left it alone. So, Will Fair was then sent under armed guard to the state prison in Columbia. So therefore, he was at least safe for about a month or so. And then the trial came up the next month in September of 1913. Huge crowds gathered around the Spartanburg County Courthouse. And they brought Will Fair in, shackled with chains. And the judge said, what do you plead? He said, not guilty, Captain. Well, it turns out that they had a witness who said that the lady in question, whose name was never mentioned in the newspapers, had complained about being, quote, ravished by a Negro. But then, get this, numerous testimony of policemen and doctors said that, for one thing, that the ladies did not have injuries that were the kind that you got from molestation, as well as a policeman saying that Will Fair had clothes that had no blood or no signs of ravishment or anything on them. Well, and then finally a doctor testified that the woman had been menstruating and was subject to hallucinations at the time. So what did this mean for Will Fair? The jury all white, of course, this is 1913, went into deliberation, and they came back out to the court and said, Your Honor, we're deadlocked. And they said, go back in there until you get a verdict. And so finally, September the 20th, 1913, the jury came out, and the judge said, do you have a verdict? The foreman said, yes, sir. What is your verdict? They all looked at Will Fair and said, not guilty. A lot of people, as it turned out, were not surprised. Spartanburg patted itself on the back and called itself the City of Success and trusted the Spartanburg jury and the Spartanburg Herald-Journal the next day. But for Will Fair's safety, they sent him out of state. He wound up in Virginia, where he died on Roanoke, Virginia, where he died in October of 1946 at the age of 64. Sheriff William J. White remained the sheriff until 1921, and he died in 1943. And I found out about the story through a book called 100 Years of Lynching by Ralph Ginsberg, and Linda Connolly of the Spartanburg Herald-Journal, and I did a story about that in the Spartanburg Herald-Journal newspaper in August of the year 2000, and I put it in my book, Black South Carolina, that you see over here, in 2008. And as it turns out that after Sheriff White's death, the story passed down through the family, so that today, Michael Smith, who was the great-grandnephew of Sheriff William J. White, said that the story was passed down through the generations in his family, and he incidentally was a U.S. Marshal. So the story was passed down to him, down to his family, and he passed it to his children. And now I'm passing it to you, the story of the sheriff who stopped the lynching. This is Damon Fordham.